the prosperity of a country matters, whether you will win or not. And I have also used this to explain the paradox that why is it that the United States tends to conduct a more aggressive foreign policy, for instance, in the Soviet Union, which internally was an utmost evil empire, but of course an empire not run by complete morons who did not know anything about economics whatsoever. They did know, of course, that in a long, drawn-out war, they would tend to lose out against a comparatively large country such as the United States, and because of that, cared more about internal affairs, keeping those things that they already controlled under control, whereas a country like the United States knows we will, of course, win all wars. Accordingly, we can afford to be more aggressive in our foreign policy.
How much is this influenced by culture and the nature of a society? I mean, for example, in the United States, you have a kind of expansionary impulse at the root of our history, whereas a country like Switzerland, which is very wealthy, you see no kind of, as far as I know, no kind of expansionary impulse within that population.
I think very early in the Swiss history, Switzerland also pursued aggressive policies, and they were beaten back in this by countries that were significantly larger than they themselves were, and then decided, so to speak, now we stay within the borders that currently exist, and follow a policy of neutrality. But in the Swiss history, there does exist in the early phases some imperialist impulse as well.
You know, another thing that you've said, Chris, I mean, I could speak all day about all the counterintuitive conclusions that you've demonstrated in the course of your writings, but one of them concerns your demonstration. I remember one time about that the U.S. Constitution really represented an expansion of the state, not really an attempt to rein it in or curb it. Would you say it's a general principle that anytime you find a new constitution being asserted by a state, that it's most likely there's an ulterior motive to expand it beyond its current?
It is always an attempt to centralize, because the confederation that existed before was obviously less centralized, and the Constitution was precisely the attempt to overcome the limitations of a federation and create a central state, initially a very weak central state, but one that predictably became ever more centralized. You do find the same thing also in Switzerland. I mean, even though they abstained, of course, from aggressive foreign policies, largely due to the fact that they were surrounded by far larger countries than they themselves are. Initially, almost all powers was rested with the cantons, which are, so to speak, the equivalents of the American states. But this has also been, in the course of time, been gradually eroded, and the central government in Switzerland has also acquired more and more power. So the process is the same. It has proceeded in a somewhat smaller pace than it did in the United States. Even nowadays, the cantons are far more powerful than the American states are, and in the Swiss case, the cantons are also still very homogeneous. In a country like Switzerland, where you have German-speaking people, where you have French-speaking people, where you have Italian-speaking people, and then a small group of They speak Rhaeto-Romanic language, a very small place. The cantons are almost completely homogeneous. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for Switzerland to stay as stable and as harmonious as it is, because one nationality would have tried to dominate the others. There is still quite a distinct difference between the German-speaking parts of Switzerland and the French-speaking parts of Switzerland. The German-speaking parts are more free market oriented, less socialistic in their general outlook. The French cantons are more so, and even if they have plebiscites, countrywide plebiscites, you can see that the French-speaking parts are more favorable disposed to becoming part of the European Union, whereas the German-speaking parts are vigorously opposed to it. So even though people mention Switzerland frequently as a multicultural society, Switzerland is not in this sense a multicultural society, because the cantons, which are still quite influential, the cantons are homogeneous.